how to knit continental style, like you've never seen it before. Hi everyone, Norman here. This video is for all knitters who want to improve their continental knitting or are currently trying to make the switch to continental style knitting, but it just doesn't work. This video will be all about the important details that are typically left out from other videos simply because they happen subconsciously or are taken as given for granted, or that part is obvious, when in reality to a beginner it typically isn't. Let's dive right into it. This video has 4 major parts. So first I will show you how I really cast on stitches for those of you who are getting started or want to improve their cast on. Then I will do a very intensive focus session on the continental knit stitch in slow motion and how I really tension my yarn from different angles, followed by an extensive section on continental style purling, and then I will end this video with some real-life examples of me knitting an actual project from various different angles and perspectives. Please use the chapter function of YouTube as you see fit. Let's start with something seemingly simple, a standard long tail cast on. So my ball is here on the left side, and a sizable tail that is roughly 3 times as long as your project will be right here on the right side. Then I flip over my hand, pick up my yarn and wrap it around my pinky finger twice clockwise. So once and twice. Then I flip my hand back and guide the yarn here across the back of my hand. Let it rest here at the tip of my index finger, and then I flip over my hand one more time and wrap the tail. So this part here is connected to the tail. I wrap it around my thumb once, and again I do it clockwise. In the last step we can secure the tail here between ring and pinky finger, and then we can start casting on stitches. I hold my knitting needle like so. Can you see this? This is how I hold my knitting needle. If you want a stretchier cast on using 2 needles or a needle one size bigger. So to cast on the first stitch, I dive in here through that loop around the thumb, coming in from below. Then I flip my hand over to the side and grab the yarn here towards the index finger. Then I pull that through, and as I pull through I let go of the yarn, the loop around my thumb, and then I tighten up by spreading my thumb and my index finger. This is your first stitch. Now I secure this stitch with my right index finger, and then I pull the knitting needle towards me to create what many people call a slingshot position. See, this is a little slingshot. My yarn here is still wrapped around my pinky finger twice. From here we repeat this motion all over again. So here there is another loop here around my thumb. So I dive in from below, grab the yarn towards my index finger from above, pull it through, and as I pull through I let go of the loop around my thumb and tighten up using my thumb and index finger. Again, I secure these stitches and pull it towards me to create another slingshot. Again, I dive in from below, grab the yarn, and now as I pull through, I want you to focus on this little strand here, because as I tighten up, I make sure that it's sitting right next to the previous stitch. Let's focus on that bit one more time. So I pull the yarn towards me, dive in from below, grab the yarn, and as I pull through, I make sure it's sitting right next to the previous stitch. Now, another thing I will do, every 3 or 4 stitches, I will actually let go of the yarn here to ensure that it can balance itself out. So, I let go and then I just pick it up one more time. Then I dive in from below, grab the yarn, pull through. So, every couple of stitches I will let go and just... So this is a motion you need to practice. As you can see, I'm no longer securing it like so, but like so. See here with these fingers. Always making sure that each stitch sits right next to it. And whenever I see, okay, the plies are coming apart, I let go of the yarn, then it can balance itself out a bit, and you will see how it looks nice and neat again. Then I do 1 or 2 stitches, let go, and cast on another couple of stitches. Now I promised you a couple of different positions, so let's cast on a couple of stitches as if you were sitting right opposite me. And in this case, I want you to focus not on the, well, you can, but the actual forming of stitches, rather how I hold my needle here and tension the yarn here with my left hand. Maybe in watching, you spot a slight little differences, or you glean some little bits and pieces that have been eluding you so far. Now let's cast on a couple of more stitches in slow motion. And now let's show you how I cast on stitches in real speed. So if this was my project, this is how I would cast on stitches. If you are a beginner, this is probably way too fast for you. But for the experienced knitters, maybe you see a little detail that I make differently than you. With your cast on done, we can focus on the Continental knit stitch. So from here you need to turn your work around and then we can start knitting in this direction. But very important, how do I actually pick up my yarn? How do I tension it? So again, I will wrap it around my pinky finger once, twice, guide it across the back of my hand, and then pick up my knitting needle like so. At first, this can be very, very difficult, especially to judge the correct distance. So here's my advice. Start wrapping quite close to the knitting needle, and then as you bring it across the back of your hand, you can pull on the working yarn and then just stop when there's around, well, a bit over 1 inch or 3 centimeters of a buffer here. See, here's how I hold my knitting needles. My pinky finger actually doesn't do a lot. Most of it is done by my thumb and the opposing ring finger and middle finger. And then the index finger shouldn't be straight. So it can be sometimes a little bit deceiving depending on the camera angle, but this would be a straight index finger. This is not good. It should be as relaxed as possible, but very, very important. Don't just stress or focus on the index finger. The rest of your fingers should be just as relaxed. Same goes for your wrist. Ideally speaking, your wrist here is straight and never bent. This is a very common mistake I see in knitting. People obsess over things like the index finger, only to end up with overextended thumbs or wrists that are constantly twisting or so. Everything down from your shoulder to your fingertips should be as relaxed as possible. Now here's how I hold the other knitting needles. So very, very similar. My pinky finger and ring finger wrap around the base of the knitting needle. My thumb here presses against it from the other direction. Here these two fingers are actually doing very, very little. They sometimes touch the knitting needle guided, but they are not actually holding it. Here also watch my thumbs. So typically this is the position of my thumbs. They're not hyperextended like this. This will put a lot of stress on these tendons and muscles, and then you will get problems here in the wrist and in the shoulder area actually. So try to assume a position like this. So with these important bits out of the way, let's knit a couple of stitches. So I start by inserting my knitting needle into the first stitch, my right knitting needle into the first stitch from left to right. Now this has a lot of beginners confused because I say from left to right, but isn't this from right to left? Well, it actually is from left to right, but because I'm lazy, I'm more or less stabbing from front to back. Right to left would be this. I'm going in from left to right. Then I guide my knitting needle here around the yarn and wrap it counterclockwise. See, this is counterclockwise. And then I use my index finger to guide this stitch through and pull it, tighten up and lift it off. This is how I handle the first stitch of a row only. From here, I knit like this. So my middle finger here locks the first two stitches. So here I can move them forward like this. The crevice between my middle finger and the knitting needle here guides the yarn. See here, this guides the yarn. And then I extend this loop here, so to the side. Sorry, to the side. So it's this motion. So I just the middle finger locks the yarn, and then I just extend this until I can see the yarn, see the working yarn here peeking through. So I just extend it to the side, and then I pick it through, tighten up, lift off. Now there are a couple of more motions involved here, so let's analyze them bit by bit. So in reality, I extend, so first of all, I just extend the loop. And then, because I still can't kind of pick it up very easily, I flick my right wrist like so, and my left wrist like so. And this improves the angle where I can pick this through. Once I have it picked through, I can assume this position again, tighten up and drop it off. One more time. So extend, flick, pick through, go back, tighten up, lift. Extend, flick, pick through, go back, tighten up, lift up. Let's do that a couple of more times in slow motion. So as you can see, there are barely any movements involved, just a little flick of your wrists and a little movement here with the tip of your knitting needle. If you have been paying attention, you probably noticed that my hands aren't just only extending and flicking. There are quite a couple of different little motions involved. All my little fingers, wrists and so on are performing. So let's focus on them one by one and analyze each little section of my hand so you get a better picture. So I'm gonna knit a couple of stitches here, and I want you to focus on my middle finger, index finger here only. So I'm just knitting a couple of stitches and just focus. I'm knitting here in real speed here. Just focus on what my index finger does. So my index finger, it's very, very difficult to see. It's almost a little bit like dancing around. Let's take a look at this from this angle, and again I want you to focus on my left index finger only. And maybe you see how it's like dancing around. I mean, it's tiny little motion, but see how it's like do. So let's analyze a little bit what I'm doing. So I extend, flick, pick through, and as I pick through, focus on my index finger. As I pick through, the index finger comes down a little bit because it's relaxed. There is no big tension here. I can easily pull it through. Then, as I drop it off, I pull on the working yarn to tighten this up and let this stitch be defined by the barrel of the knitting needle. I want all these stitches to be the exact same size. So I tighten up. But of course, then there comes a point where this is tight, and then I kind of roll back. And this is to gather more yarn here from the pinky finger, from my ball. And then as I drop things, the finger comes down again. Extend, pick through, finger comes down, tighten up, gather more yarn, finger comes down. The problem is when I do this slower, I'm doing it differently than when I do it in real speed. So this is what it looks when I do it in real speed. There is another thing my index finger does. So in the beginning I told you, well, this is the ideal knitting position, and you will rarely see me actually assuming this exact position, especially here in the tutorials where things are always a little bit more artificial. So through years and years of knitting, I instinctively know how taut the working yarn needs to be. So sometimes, for whatever reason, because I've been showing you something, I accidentally end up gathering more yarn, so this isn't taut anymore. So what will automatically happen is that my finger tries to balance things out again. So apart from the dancing, you will see that my finger also changes. I'm really exaggerating, changes position to make up for any slight little differences here. And that's actually one of the reasons why I prefer this way to tension the yarn. So from here to here, this is a very, very long distance. So a small movement, a small difference in height will only change, will change the tension very, very lightly. If I was knitting in a much more closed position like this, some people do this, some people knit like so. If I was doing it like this, a small movement would be a big change in tension. Like so, a small movement is an even smaller difference. So I feel this gives me personally a lot more flexibility, and that's why I prefer it. So to sum it up, I do my little finger dance, and on top of that, layered on top of that, I do this subconsciously. I check how taut this working yarn is and adjust accordingly. Now in that context, I also want you to focus on my pinky finger. So as you can see, the pinky finger does its own kind of acrobatics because it serves as the end point of my little tensioning wheel, triangle, machine, whatever you want to call it. And today it's rather warm here, so this cotton yarn starts to be very sticky, so it's better for me to just go around the pinky finger once, and then it can stay put and doesn't need to do all that much balancing here for the yarn. It still will do it, but a little bit less. But still the point remains. My index finger and my little pinky finger these two can tension the yarn. See how they do that? Now that was my index finger and how I tension the yarn, but you probably noticed that all my other fingers are doing various stuff as well. So you probably saw that I never push the yarn forward. So how do I actually push the yarn forward? Let's take a look at it one more time. And first of all, I want you to focus on my right index finger. So I knit a stitch here, slight flick, pull tight, drop up. And now my right index finger kind of snaps forward, very short motion, and pushes the stitch down. So can you see? Very short, like one of these snapping tortoises. Catches the stitch. Then I want you to focus on this finger here, the left middle finger. With every stitch I make, see, it pushes the stitches forward. So we have this, and this. So this and this. Now after a couple of stitches, you will also notice that my right thumb is also doing something. So the thumbs are also doing something. This thumb is doing this, and this thumb is doing this. Take a look. With every stitch, my left thumb is pushing stitches here. So I have a reservoir of stitches here. And with every stitch, my left thumb is pushing stitches here towards my middle finger. And if I have 3 or 4 stitches here bunched up between middle thumb and index finger, my left thumb snaps forward. So, and then every 20 stitches or so, I need to gather more stitches. See what it's doing? So, if you look at it, and I really want you to focus it, my fingers are constantly doing this here. Constantly doing this here with every stitch, and then after a couple of stitches I bunch things up to have more buffer here. So let's take a look at this from this angle. So I start by bunching up stitches. So here these two fingers are holding all these bunched up stitches, and then as you can see, all my other fingers are so relaxed that they also constantly move along. So this is another of the keys. So these fingers aren't actually really transporting stitches, but they're still moving along. So here, you can't see it from this, my thumb snaps forward, and then these here are also kind of trying to push more stitches forward, whereas here my left middle ring finger is always trying to kind of manage the reservoir of stitches here bunched up in my left hand to feed it to the thumb, and then the thumb feeds the stitches to the middle finger and over to the other side. So it's a handy little conveyor belt, but of course I do have to stop ever so often. For Continental knitters, purling is a little bit more difficult. So I enter from right to left, then I push the yarn forward with my middle finger and pull through. Let's analyze this step by step. So enter, then I flick the wrist like so, just like before, push, and as I pull through, I rotate my wrists back again. Enter, push, enter, push. Oops, split the yarn there. Enter, push. My left wrist also moves along a little bit. So before we had this motion, now we have this motion. See? So it's a tiny little bit different, but my left wrist doesn't do as much. Let's do a couple of more stitches in super slow motion. Again, there are a couple of things I would like to highlight. So first of all, needle movement. My right needle does this movement, while my left needle does this movement. So, in, flick, out, in. Just focus on my right needle, just the movement of my right needle. So, as I finish the stitch, I use the movement of my right needle to lift that off. See? Whereas the left needle just sort of goes up and down. I'm just exaggerating here. So here's another angle of the exact same thing. Again, just focus on the relative position and movement of these needles, up and down, constantly doing this. Of course, there's the left index finger we need to pay attention as well. So, as I insert, push, as I push, the index finger comes down naturally because this isn't stressed, this isn't, I push it down, and then while things are still on the needle, this is important, my index finger will push things out. I'm exaggerating now. So see, so it does a little dance, but not as much as with the knit stitch. So there's while the stitch, this part is important, while the stitch is still on the needle, it pulls tight. Again, focus on the index finger with each purl stitch. It slightly pulls tight, but maybe you can see it's not dancing around as much as when I do the knit stitch. Not saying this means anything, just oops, how I do it. So what are the other fingers doing? Well, they are transporting stitches to and from the needle. So I enter, wrap, and then I lift the stitch over. It's really a lifting motion. Then my right index finger snaps forward again, but since I go in that much, it's more like a lifting motion, so it doesn't move as much. Every couple of stitches, my thumb also comes forward, and here on the left side, my thumb basically does most of the work and pushes, but as I come back, I also fix this stitch here ready to be knitted, but it's actually, I'm not moving it forward, it's more or less moved forward through the lifting. See, through the lifting it's moved. I'm not actually moving my left middle finger a lot. So here the difference between knitting and purling for me is that the right index finger doesn't move as much, it's just up and down more or less, and that most of the transportation is actually done via lifting, exaggerating here. So we covered knitting, we covered purling, but what if I need to switch between the two stitches, like for ribbing or so? Well, then you simply bring the yarn forward. So I did 2 knit stitches here, and as I lift the stitch off my knitting needle, I bring the yarn forward and purl 1 stitch. Purl another stitch here. And then, since I want to knit the next 2 stitches, as I lift the purl stitch off the knitting needle, I bring the yarn to the back. See, as I lift it off, I bring the yarn forward. So, in English knitting, you do have the term yarn forward. In continental knitting, that is actually something that will confuse knitters, because, you know, it's just this motion. And so it's just a tiny little different compared to, so a fraction of a millimeter basically. So there's so little difference that, I mean, the yarn needs to be in front, but that's it, see? And if I do a 1-by-1 ribbing, going slow now, you don't actually kind of bring the yarn forward, as this makes sense. If this makes sense, you're just, as you lift it off, you bring it to the back. So let's take a look at the exact same 1-by-1 ribbing from this point of view here, but as you can see, it's just this tiny little motion. Everything else really remains the same. As you lift the stitch off the knitting needle, you change between yarn in front and yarn in the back. It's really that simple. Now there is a big issue with everything I've shown you so far, and that is basically why we are sitting here in my living room while I am working on yet another sample of my Braxa shawl. By the way, the pattern is available on Etsy and Ravelry, and I want to use this to show you how I actually knit in, well, real life, I guess. So let's slow this video down by 30%. So I recorded at my normal speed, but I am slowing things down now to 30%. So you can see myself knitting with my actual technique, in my actual posture, in my actually knitting chair, with my actual technique. And it's my hope that you can spot all the fine little differences here. And of course, we also need to talk about posture, how I actually knit. So you can see my hands are actually very low and rather at a 90-degree angle. And I feel this is, or I really hope this helps you quite a bit. Let's zoom in on that view as well, so you can see how my fingers move when you are sitting opposite me. Again, I'm slowing down here to 30%. So I kept on knitting with my normal speed, but this is slowed down so you can spot all these fine little details maybe a little bit easier. Still, feel free to play this section of the video multiple times, or even use the settings button to slow it down even further. And then pick one finger or one needle or just the tip of my needles and focus on those, just on those. Don't lose yourself in the complexity of what all my fingers and needles are doing at the same time. Just focus on one little bit and then replay it maybe, and focus on another bit and try to, well, understand what I'm really doing there. Here is yet another view of me knitting across, this time from the side. Maybe this also helps you seeing the fine little details. And again, I'm going to slow down now to 30% so you can really see what I'm doing and maybe even knit along or try to knit along. This section of this tutorial wouldn't be complete without me purling a couple of stitches as well in a much more natural posture, using yarn and knitting needles I prefer. So the message in this section of the video is twofold. First of all, here is how I actually knit, actually knitting, or in this case, purling speed and so on. And secondly, if you notice, well, things aren't 100% right yet, then you can introduce change by using different yarn, different knitting needles, change your posture, move to a different chair. You don't slouch on the couch, but use a proper chair, or the other way around. So these little bits also help to perfect your knitting style and can be used. So the tools and materials you use, try to optimize them. Of course, let's not forget this side, this view here either. Maybe it helps you seeing little bits that eluded you before, little bits that ultimately matter, because often it's the small things that make all the difference and not the overall technique, which is often easy to see and teach. But when it comes to tension and stitch definition, it's often all the things we usually don't talk about. And here is just another angle of me purling all across this row. It's my sincere hope that these different viewpoints show you continental knitting like you've never seen it before. Still, I would like to stress a couple of things here. So first of all, I have been knitting for over 35 years. I'm a very prolific knitter with probably thousands of finished projects under my belt. And those 35 years of knitting, of practice, of hard practice, helped me to reach the point where I am now. So please don't compare your chapter 1 or 2 with my decades of experience. On top of that, I learned needlecrafts at a very, very young age, creating a lot of muscle memory and forming and reinforcing vital neural connections. You might have learned knitting at a later age, where it will take a lot longer to create this physiological basis. So please, what I'm saying is be patient with yourself. On top of that, you might also be in the third quarter of your life where your joints and your muscles just won't play along as readily anymore. Setting your dexterity and the limits of said nimbleness aside, everybody is different on top of that. Your hands might be bigger or smaller, yet we all use the same absolute needle size and yarn weight. Some people are more flexible while others are stronger. Genetics matter, and as a result, you can only ever expect to use a video like this one here as a basis to create your own style. Look at what I've been doing, try to replicate it and practice. And if it works for you, you will quickly notice that you automatically introduce variations, and those variations isn't cheating, it's what separates the beginner from the expert knitter. Maybe you copy everything, but for purling you find it easier to use the thumb to push the yarn forward, or you tension your yarn around your middle finger, index finger, and then use that to push the yarn forward. The key word here, however, is time. Neither muscle memory nor your own style perfectly adapted to your body will be created overnight. It will take time and lots of hours of dedicated practice to achieve that. It will be even worse if you try to unlearn something. Too many knitters give up way too early, to a point where they actually navigate themselves into adopting a forced posture. And then when someone shows them a better way, that will feel forced and unnatural. It's a bit like when someone sits with a round back all their life and then they develop almost, like a hunchback and never stretch out all these tendons and so. And then someone shows them how to sit straight and finally relieve those discs. Yet, when this supposed right way will feel very unnatural and uncomfortable, and will take years and years of therapy and practice until they find their way back. And knitting and changing your knitting style can be very much like that, especially when you change from something you can do subconsciously. You don't have to think about knitting as an experienced knitter. You don't think about knitting a stitch. And then you change style and suddenly it needs a lot of active thought to form one stitch, and it's just so much slower on top of that, and that's frustrating. That being said, and equally as important, changing your knitting style or knitting in general should never hurt. If it does, stop, take a break, come back. And if it starts hurting again, stop again, take a break. In the beginning, you typically cramp up a bit, that's normal. But if it hurts long term, then look into ways to fix it. There is nothing wrong in admitting that Continental style is not for you. I mean, I've heard so many stories of people changing from English style to Continental style because the former was putting too much stress on their right wrist, and that's the reason why I don't do English style knitting. My right wrist just wouldn't like it. But I have heard just as many stories claiming the exact opposite thing. And then, of course, you will hear stories from people switching to combination knitting or Norwegian purling or, backwards knitting is their revelation and so on. While I kind of suspect that more than half of them were actually looking for a shortcut when they actually should have invested a little bit more practice to see even better gains. These two are valid styles. It's the results that matter and your happiness. Not of if me or some, knitting crew prone to gatekeeping like Revelry or so, or the non-existing knitting police approve it. Your happiness and your health always come first. It's your hobby, not mine. And well, it is mine, but you know what I'm trying to say. Anyway, that was how I knit Continental style. Comment below if you have any questions or suggestions. And as always, happy knitting and enjoy the rest of your day.